Hey, it's me, Vicky Marie, and I'm continuing here with the College Police report, College of Policing report into the, supposedly independent investigation into what happened to Nicola or what happened with the investigation. And I am on part 6, which, as far as the actual report is concerned, we're starting with chapter 3, which is communications. And I am reading out what I think is important in this report. If you feel differently, or you want to read the whole report, it's available on the internet. Anyone can find it on the internet, but I'm just trying to condense it. I've been trying to condense it in parts so it's more palatable, it's easier to understand, because it's a huge document. I'm currently on page 65. There are 143 pages, so still a long way to go. But anyway, here we are, chapter 3, communications. So, media narrative. So here on this chart, I hate charts, sorry, I'm not brilliant with charts, though I think it is quite clear. The chart shows the peak number of daily published articles and shares on X, formerly known as Twitter, and it compares the Nicola Bulley investigation, the disappearance of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon, which you may remember they disappeared after an accident with their baby. It's very mysterious situation, and they were finally arrested, and unfortunately the baby was found deceased. And then also compared with the implosion of the Titan submersible. So we can see here the article count for Nicola Bulley was a lot more than the Constance Martin and Mark Gordon case, but not quite as many as the Titan submersible. But the shares on Twitter are more even than the Titan submersible. So I think they're just trying to make it clear just what the media interest was. So they say, I think they had a really early turning point that felt very weird as an audience member and that just made us all look at it more closely. Excuse me, sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. That was the point at which they said that their working hypothesis was that she got into the water and by accident. It felt very early to say that. And for your cynics in the public domain, certainly TikTokers, them TikTokers get a lot of stick. I think that's where the interest starts to come from. It was, what do the police know? Because they always seem so sure about this. I think that raised a lot of suspicions. And this was a senior police communicator external to LC. Now, the thing is, as we've realised, they don't ever mention any names, so we don't know the names of any of these people. So then it goes on to talk about the first press conference on the 3rd of February. LC's media handling difficulties were demonstrated by the first formal police press conference. It was arranged at short notice and without adequate preparation. The venue was a local hall in the village of St. Michael's on Wyre, close to where Nicola disappeared. The press office of LC's M&E team arrived to find the venue already full of both journalists and members of the public, and they were unable to check media credentials or control who had access to the press conference. Another, the whole thing, the whole investigation, I think they admit it in this, it just was rubbish from start to finish. Well, it's not finished yet, really. They weren't checking press passes going in there, and there were some cranks in there by that point. I don't know what they mean by cranks, what are they trying to say? But anyway, this is a national media journalist, so they weren't cranks, they mean some social media person. You've got to put somebody on the door to check. The people who are going in, they're incredible conspiracy theorists. people who write about UFOs, or like the American government. The uniformed superintendent who led the briefing had been briefed by the M&E team and wanted to do the press conference. So that would be Sally, wouldn't it? Sally Riley. However, the superintendent was exposed to a range of questions from the media. The superintendent did a good job of briefing the media, apart from one crucial answer they gave. So a reporter asked, "Are there any other factors with Nicola that may have contributed towards the situation? Was she ill, or was she taking any medication or any underlying condition?" And Sally answered, "We've clearly considered the whole picture, but that is not relevant at this time. No, not at all." The answer was misleading. It was known at this stage that Nicola had some medical issues that would make this investigation high risk. In fact, the investigation was being conducted very intensively as a result. This should have been corrected by the M&E team as soon as it was identified as such. This was not done, and the opportunity to frame the investigation with the media in an informed way was not taken. This was the point at which the media narrative began to stray from what the police were saying, and speculation started to take over. The conclusion arrived at was that Lancashire Constabulary should have corrected the misleading statement given in the first press conference and used the opportunity to provide an informed, non-reportable briefing to the media. Lancashire Constabulary should ensure that police officers who may be required to engage with the media are properly trained. Quite often in this report, they talk about people not being properly trained in advance and are prepared to provide accurate information. Recommendations: LC should routinely review statements made during press conferences to ensure the accuracy of comments, and where necessary, clarify or retract comments at the earliest opportunity. So, demands on the media and engagement team. The LCM&E team has told the review that they were at full stretch for the entirety of the MB investigation and worked far beyond their normal hours to support the investigation and search for Nicola. They held 5 press briefings, issued 20 press releases and several family statements, and answered more than 500 media calls. Digital demand increased by more than 650%. And on top of this, of course, they had other things to deal with too. They dealt with 76 incidents, handled 200 media calls, and issued 78 press releases, including 6 other MFH cases as part of their normal workload. Their commitment and work ethic is beyond question. I expect they did work very hard, to be honest. The demands placed on them during this month-long period were exceptional. So the head of LC's M&E team told the review that the demands placed on my team as a consequence of the media and online interest in this case were exceptional and at times overwhelming. The media narrative was driven by many experts who talked freely yet were ill-informed, and by content creators on social channels whose drive for the truth was at the expense of facts. Well, you know, there's been a lot of people like that, isn't there? At times, the task in managing this felt relentless. However, during these 3 weeks, our strategy and priorities were clear: to support the investigation and to help bring Nicola home. At the centre of this was supporting the family. We had to stay focused on the facts despite the noise and on what was helpful to the investigation. The 24-hour rolling broadcast and online news cycle, as well as minute-by-minute social media reporting, places huge demands on any organisation that attracts media interest. With limited resources again in the press office function, and a straightforward investigation providing few real developments, LC were not able to control the media narrative. As a result, speculation and misinformation became widespread on social media. I do think that, though, was combined with the whole mystery of everything. It was a mysterious case. It wasn't just because of that. It was the mystery, wasn't it? Anyway, in my opinion. So the media said, the MSM, a national media news editor, said, as news media, we needed more communication from the police. A vacuum was created into which stepped the social media commentators, family members and friends. It would have been very helpful if there'd been a press officer at the bench where family and friends were essentially holding daily informal press briefings. In the vacuum, the family friend became the press officer. So not only Emma was the family liaison officer, she was also the press officer. Okay, so it goes on to say that the level of interest was not fully understood across the constabulary, and we've talked about that. They did not know how to deal with this, and they didn't understand. They tried to deny the level of interest or pretend it wasn't happening. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to read everything out, so I'm just reading out to what I think are the relevant things. As I say, if you want to look at the nuts and bolts and the fine print, if you like, you can go on and actually look at the report, but it's so long I can't read everything out. So the conclusions, because they're important, the media monitoring services can provide helpful data and management information to better inform decision making within all forces. The recognition of this gap in information and the speed at which this service was procured by LC during the investigation should be commended. I don't agree with that, but anyway. Operational and senior decision makers within LC did not either recognise or act to prevent the detrimental impacts of the investigation's high-profile nature. This led to serious questions being raised about the competence of and public confidence in Lancashire Constabulary, which of course is still going on. Okay, nominated police spokesperson. LC used 4 different senior officers to lead the 5 press briefings. The uniformed superintendent, which was Sally Riley, fronted the first 3, followed by the SIO with an ACC, which was Becky, wasn't it? And Lawson, Peter Lawson. And finally, a Pit 4 detective chief superintendent. Isn't that Pauline Stables, I think? This was contrary to the guidance given on handling media in high-profile investigations in the media relations section of the Engagement and Communication APP, which states that media strategies should be agreed at senior operation level and should include the appointment of a dedicated police spokesperson. So they didn't do that either. So yeah, it was all different people, wasn't it, that we saw? Nobody, we know it's true. We started off with Sally, then it was Rebecca and Peter Lawson, then it was Pauline Stables. It was very, and then I think it was Pauline Stables again after the inquest. Anyway, the nomination of a police spokesperson proved to be complicated. Gosh, I knew this. It was a bun fight. There was significant internal disagreement between Lancashire Constabulary as to who should front the media briefings, with the advice of the M&E team at times being overridden. Sorry, stop. The benefits of having a single spokesperson include consistency in approach and messaging, as well as having an identifiable face to represent Lancashire Constabulary to the public. It seems like obvious, really, doesn't it, that if you have an official spokesperson, but it seems like they were all bickering between, probably nobody wanted to do it. It's either going to be everybody wanted to do it or nobody wanted to do it, isn't it? I mean, which way is it? LC should follow the existing protocol for identifying and supporting a single identifiable spokesperson for high-profile investigations. The greater the level of public scrutiny, the more senior the police spokesperson needs to be. Relationship with the media. No, that wasn't brilliant, was it, either? Sometimes, I'm only on page, I'm halfway through now. Did they do anything right? I think they said the search on the first day was right. I don't know. I've sort of lost track now because I'm so far into it. I've forgotten what happened on the first page. The media representatives who were spoken to as part of this review reported there's been a long-term cooling in the relationship between the media and the police service in the decades since the Leveson inquiry into the culture, practices and ethics of the press. This narrative was confirmed by senior police communications professionals that were interviewed. And the Leveson inquiry highlighted the perception that some senior police officers were too close to national media and received too much hospitality from them. It recommended that all contact between chief police officers and the media should be recorded and available for audit. At the same time, the MPS launched Operation Elvedon, a 5-year investigation into payments to public officials by the media. This resulted in 34 convictions, including 9 police officers and 21 other public officials. In addition, 29 journalists were arrested and prosecuted, but only 1 was convicted, and this conviction was overturned on appeal. So they go, oh dear me, it's a right mess, isn't it? Journalists and police communicators told the review that these events had the effect of breaking down relationships and trust between the media and the police service. And this senior police communicator external to LC said, I do think background briefings are a lost art. There is absolutely a role for background briefings, but I think the Leveson inquiry has made people incredibly nervous of them. There's a nervousness both from officers and comms teams about doing them. This is relevant to the MB investigation because a non-reportable briefing was not given. All national media journalists providing information to the review suggested that an early non-reportable briefing about the full background to Nicola Bulley's disappearance would have set context for the story and would have headed off much of the speculative reporting that ensued. Privacy concerns from the family could have been assuaged by explaining to them that a media background briefing would be strictly non-reportable and would have helped to frame accurate appeals for help. In reality, private details about Nicola became public in a way that drew widespread criticism. With the right handling, those details, could have been withheld by police and only released in a controlled way as part of the coroner's inquest. So this national media journalist said, had the media been trusted with confidential information on Miss Bulley's specific vulnerabilities from an early stage of the investigation through a non-reportable background briefing, a lot of the wild speculation that ensued on social media could have been avoided or countered, and private details of Miss Bulley's health need not ever have been shared so publicly as part of the investigation. So the LCM&E team told the review that while non-reportable briefings were sometimes used on other cases, they were no longer common practice, and there is a reluctance from operational officers to undertake them. Anyway, that's it. It's a bit of police guff there, so let's go a bit further down. One of the local newspapers spoken to as part of the review noted they did not have the full background to the story from their own community sources, but they chose not to run the details without on-the-record confirmation from the police. However, they said that knowledge of the full facts did allow them to frame their own responsible approach to reporting the story. So then it was suggested that the breakdown in the relationship between the police and the media had also come to the light during this investigation, specifically noting the significant impact that the behaviour of some reporters had on their staff. Everyone, it was just a feud between everyone, was it? It's horrible. So it seems like, because the top, I think, the toxicity in this case, as soon as any video, any reporting you do on the Nicola Bulley case, that's why I actually can't wait to get to the end of this report and just move on, because it's so nasty. Why is it so nasty? There's so many people who say they care about Nicola, but they actually don't, because all the care, they don't ever really offer anything to solving what happened to Nicola. It's just, I don't know, it's a very strange thing. I've never, the toxicity I don't get on, I've been doing my Spanish YouTube channel for a long time. I've never had that. And then any other case I don't get that. But with this, I do. What is it about? I don't know what it's about. And it seems like it bleeds over to like the relationship. Well, even the police themselves were all arguing. And then the relationship between the police and the media. And then there's a relationship between the police and the experts that were brought in, to help. It's toxicity. There's so many egos flying around. You just think, where is Nicola in all this? Where is Nicola? It's very sad. Anyway, the recommendations were that the College of Policing and the NPCC should consider how confidence between the police service and the media can be rebuilt. I think I've said before, that take generations, so that appropriate, not between the media maybe, but of course if they improve their relationship with the media, that will help with the public. But then the public these days don't really follow mainstream media, do they? So I don't know what they're going to do about that. Anyway, the process will require the process of sort of reconciliation, I suppose, will require a balanced, engaged approach from both policing and the media. And the College of Policing should ensure that training for SIOs and other specialist officers includes enhanced elements relating to communications and engagement for high-profile cases, including media and social media handling and managing family sensitivities. The College of Policing and NPCC should consider what other opportunities exist to prepare officers and staff for media activity, including their participation in press conferences and holding non-reportable media briefings. Right, I'm just looking down to see how far I'm going to go now. Yeah, because so let's have a look at the information vacuum. I'll carry on a little bit longer, but my voice is going. I've done a lot of talking today. The initial hypothesis put forward by LC investigative team was validated by the inquest verdict. Nicola's death was accidental after she had fallen into cold water. Research by scientific experts used by the investigative team also accurately predicted the date that Nicola would resurface. However, the information behind the investigative team's working hypothesis was not shared with the public. Instead, speculation and opinion from individuals outside of the investigation was widely reported by the media. This meant their hypothesis, often that Nicola Bulley was not in the river, drove the narrative for the general public. These included headlines such as the following. And you know who they're talking about here. Underwater expert explains why there's no way Nicola has been washed to sea. Nicola Bulley dive expert claims gut feeling there could be a third party involvement in disappearance. Now, this is not me saying this. This is the police report, and it's itemising the different articles. So if you want to go on and look at those articles, I'm not going into the articles. I'm just literally reading out the bullet points. Nicola Bulley could have just walked away to move on with her life, claims an ex-cop. The police couldn't have got it more wrong on Nicola Bulley. So they're not only criticising Peter Falding there, the other people who made comments. Likewise, the absence of more frequent updates from Lancashire Constabulary meant that theories from social media influencers were able to establish themselves and spread. Sorry, I've had some alioli tonight. I don't know if you know what alioli is, but it's like a garlic mayonnaise and it's repeating on me. So sorry. Updates were infrequent and sporadic. There was an information vacuum. Once it was clear how big the story was becoming, Lancashire Police should have been sending out daily updates or holding more regular briefings. From my perspective, LP were not proactive in controlling the narrative out of the story, and it was allowed to spiral out of control. A senior communicator and former lead for the National Policing social media project suggested that more information should be given to the public about how and why the public operate in certain ways. They indicated that this transparency would help to restore public confidence and trust, and could also be used as a veracity reference to help prevent the spread of misinformation on social media. So this senior police communicator said, I think there's a lack of content written for the public rather than written for policing. I think some accessible information explaining some of our procedures produced proactively rather than reactively could be really powerful. Do you know, I think that's interesting that he's saying that, because although I still think they made a complete cock up of everything, reading back through this report and how detailed it is, it has sort of clarified things that everybody was mystified about. You know, not everything, but some things. And so, yeah, that would have helped if they were more open, wouldn't it? But anyway, I think it's too late now, to be honest. Conclusions. Lancashire Constabulary should have released more regular communications to explain its working hypothesis and search methods to build public confidence. For example, using police search or dive specialists to explain key parts of the investigation. And LC should have recognised that the absence of regular updates on the progress of the investigation created a vacuum for both mainstream and social media to fill, in which conspiracy theories thrived and negative sentiment grew. Anyway, post-statement press conference, 20th of February. So this was the statement, of course, that was issued by Pauline Stables on behalf of the family the day that poor Nicola was identified, her body was identified, the day after she was found on the 19th. So the breakdown in trust between the media and the police service in general is exemplified by the reaction of the media to the Nicola Bulley family statement that was released on the 20th of February. So this was the statement. Our family liaison officers have had to confirm our worst fears today. We will never be able to comprehend what Nikki had gone through in her last moments, and that will never leave us. We will never forget Nikki, how could we? She was the centre of our world. She was the one who made our lives so special, and nothing will cast a shadow over that. Our girls will get the support they need from the people who love them the most, and it saddens us to think that one day we will have to explain to them that the press and members of the public accused their dad of wrongdoing, misquoted and vilified friends and family. This is absolutely appalling. They have to be held accountable. This cannot happen to another family. We tried, now this was the bit that totally threw me. We tried last night to take in what we've been told in the day, only to have Sky News and ITV. Now, bear in mind, Sky News and ITV had both been used for interviews and things by the family and Paul, Emma, etc., and Louise and Ernie and Dot, to be honest, Sky News. They said only to have them making contact with us directly when we have expressly asked for privacy. I do feel that they could have just said, look, sorry, we don't want to talk at the moment. I don't know. I was very surprised at this statement. They again have taken it upon themselves to run stories about us, to sell papers and increase their own profiles. But, they volunteered to be interviewed with them. But anyway, it is shameful they have acted in this way. Leave us alone now. Do the press and other media channels and so-called professionals not know when to stop? These are our lives. Now, by these so-called professionals, they mean Peter Folding, I think. These are our lives and our children's lives. To those who genuinely helped and supported us, privately we thank you. The community support in St. Michael's, friends, neighbours and strangers, has been nothing short of comforting and heartwarming. Friends, you know who you are. Thank you. Our hearts truly break for others who have missing loved ones. Keep that hope alive. It's that hope again. And then it was finally, Nikki, you are no longer a missing person. You have been found. We can let you rest now. We love you, always have and always will. We'll take it from here. Oh, it gives me a chill actually. That was a very strange statement. I thought at the time, and I still think now. Anyway, this statement, which was read out by a senior police officer, was very critical of the media. Journalists and editors told the Review that, in their opinion, the statement had been inspired directly by the police to deflect criticism away from themselves. God, they've alienated everybody, haven't they, the police? The press office were clearly involved in the family's statements at the end of the investigation, where they blasted the media's intrusion. I felt that this part of their statement, read out by police, had to be orchestrated by the press team and was a complete and utter disgrace. vilifying the media for the press office's own incompetence. That's what a national media journalist said. It's funny, isn't it? Because when I heard that, I didn't think it had been inspired by the press team, but maybe it was. Obviously when the media listened to it, they were shocked as well, but they took that view on it. The Flows, who were present with the family when the media statement in question was drafted, and we've already learnt that these Flows were not trained and were only brought in later on. But anyway, they told the review that it did help the family with the writing of the statement, but that its contents were entirely the thoughts of the family and no one else. I never felt like it was I thought those comments came from the family, whoever you think of as the family. The family was especially angry at the time at the actions of a small number of journalists who had contacted them directly after Nicola had been found. The family subsequently complained about this to Ofcom, and the Flows told the review that the statement went through up to 15 iterations to ensure that it represented what the family wanted to say. You always feel like you just want to know who is the family, because I know that that Izzy from Sky News, he did say that he had contacted, he had messaged the family or Paul Ansell, but he did get a reply back off him. I mean, really, what he should have just done then is replied and said, look, I just don't want to talk. But apparently he replied and said pure agony, didn't he, or something like that. And then, of course, when other news channels saw that Sky News reported that, they all reported it as well. So, but I do, that was the time, really. I think Izzy had probably, felt that he'd built up a relationship with the family and he could send that message. And of course, they could have not answered it, or they could have just said, look, sorry, this is not the right, if you've had a sort of, I mean, I don't know. It's a very difficult one. Could have even got angry and said, why are you even contacting him now? But there was a reply given. So I think that was a big shock when that was said at the press conference, because he had replied. I felt a bit sorry for Sky News, to be honest. But at the end of the day, journalists are journalists. That's what they do. That's their job, and when you want them to help you, because they wanted them to help in the beginning, apparently, the police said, didn't they, that they wanted, the family had wanted the press on their side, and because they thought that would mean that they had a better chance of finding Nicola. Because, you want the publicity. And then when it comes to a time you don't want it anymore, perhaps you should just tell them that politely, and then if they still don't listen, you should at least give them one chance maybe to just, not contact you. I don't know. Now, I thankfully have never been in that position, so hopefully I'll never have to find out what it feels like, because that's the problem, isn't it? You don't know how it would feel and how you would react. Anyway, it was stated to the review that no senior officers and no one from the press office were involved in any way in that family statement, although they reviewed it before it was made public. Yeah, maybe they should have tried to advise them on the wording of it. The lack of involvement by senior officers and the M&E team in the production or editing of the statement was itself an omission. Someone with media expertise should have reviewed the statement and suggested a correction to the misleading line that failed to draw a distinction between mainstream media and social media, which specifically mentioned Sky News and ITV. It said there's nothing about social media. Anyway, so basically what this national media journalist said was that the Lancashire Press Office should not have allowed the final media statement to go out without pushback on the line that media reported false claims about Paul Ansell. At no time did the mainstream media accuse Paul Ansell of wrongdoing, as that would have been libelous, and the Press Office have allowed information to go to the public domain which they know is false. So the conclusions were every family and member of the public has the absolute right to comment on a police investigation and related activity they've been subject to. However, if the police offer support with such a statement, this should be conducted by a member of the team with experience of media engagement. You just feel that what the conclusions and recommendations in each of these things, it's like stating the bleeding obvious. You know, it's like Monty Python. Yes, it's true, but of course, why would they not have known that? If the statement offers wider comment beyond the investigation, the police should consider whether this is appropriate for them to read the statement on their behalf. This would ensure that any confusion on the statement's attribution or origin is avoided. And it was not appropriate for the police spokesperson to deliver criticism of the media on behalf of the family. This created a risk of it being regarded as the view of the police. Right, I think I'm just going to go, I'm going to go as far as this. Funeral, the 8th of March. Media attention around the case continued after Nicola was found. On the 2nd of March, Elsie wrote to IPSO on behalf of Nicola Bulley's family, notifying them that a private funeral would be taking place on the 8th of March. On behalf of the family, Elsie asked there to be no press attendance at any point during the funeral, and that no reporter should approach attendees for comment in order to ensure their privacy. And this request was passed on. Conclusions: despite the significant public interest in the investigation, there was no media presence at the funeral and no subsequent coverage. Now, I just want to say there that in itself looks suspicious to people. People were saying, oh, she'd not really been buried, and because there was a no-fly zone put up so that people couldn't send drones over to take photos, and that people took that as a conspiracy theory, didn't they? There was wild things that people have said, saying that literally, that she never existed and she wasn't buried and it was a psyops and it was this, that and the other. I personally don't agree with any of that at all. So, and I've said it repeatedly, Nicola Bulley existed. What we don't know is how she died, really. And although I do think it's good that Matt, why couldn't they have just nominated one person, just take one photo? That's what normally happens, isn't it? Keep it private. Of course it should be private. No interviews, no, I'm not saying any of that. But just one photo, just that people knew that it was, sometimes you can create more mystery with nothing, than with everything. Most sort of famous people, for example, who die and they want a private funeral, but there's normally an official photographer, at least just because, that's the public. Oh. If you sort of withdraw things completely from the public, they will speculate. That is human nature. So because they didn't allow any photos or anything, people were denying that the funeral had even taken place. Anyway, despite the significant public interest in the investigation, there was no media presence. Now, it says here this was a welcome step that allowed Nicola's family privacy at an extraordinarily difficult time. And I'm sure it was horrible, but do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that, everybody should have just rocked up and be able to take a load of photos, but a controlled, one person from the media, like just take one photo that would just keep. I just remember with Diana, you remember Princess Diana, she was the most photographed woman in the world, and she would allow, just to stop, she would allow what, of course they took it further, but of course rules are different now. They couldn't do now what they used to do then. But that's how she used to try and control it. Like when they went on holiday to Cloisters, her and the boys and Charlie Boy or whatever, they would have one, a couple of official photos taken, and they'd be the photos that go around the press the next day. The press were happy they had a photo, but after that they were left to sort of ski in peace. Again, I think it just wasn't managed properly. So the use of the IPSO request by the M&E team should be commended and should be seen as an example of good practice. And as I say, I agree up to a point, but I think they could have made a big difference if they just would have allowed even one photo to be taken, so that people weren't turning around and saying, "Oh, that funeral never took place and it was a psyops," etc. To me, that's the most horrible thing that people have said about this case, that she wasn't a real person. Of course, she was a real person. She was a mum. She was a real person. She was a mother and a daughter and a partner, And so to deny she existed, personally, I think is horrible. But there you go. Okay, so that's it for this one. So in the next video, we'll be looking at social media. That's the next step. Oh, and I'm nearly, that's page 80, is it? No, 79. So only 60 more to go. Okay. I'll see you in the next video. Live and love carefully. And until I see you again, may your God always go with you. Night, night.